In many high-security prisons, control begins with separation. Across the United States and other countries with comparable correctional systems, specialized housing units are used to isolate individuals considered high risk. These units are known by different names: special housing units, administrative segregation, or security housing units. The purpose is consistent: to limit contact, reduce influence, and maintain order. Inside these units, individuals are typically confined to single cells for between 22 and 24 hours a day. The cells are small, often measuring between 6 by 8 and 8 by 10 feet. They contain a fixed bed, a stainless steel sink, and a toilet. Windows, if present, are narrow and reinforced. In some facilities, natural light is minimal or absent. Daily movement is controlled and scheduled. When a person leaves the cell, it is usually alone. Hands are restrained. Movement is escorted. Recreation, when permitted, often takes place in a separate enclosure, sometimes referred to as a dog run, a small, caged area with high walls and limited visibility beyond. Communication is restricted. Meals are passed through slots in the door. Conversations occur through barriers, steel, glass, or distance. Physical contact is eliminated. In many cases, individuals do not touch another person for extended periods. These conditions are not temporary for everyone. Correctional records and oversight reports have documented cases where individuals remain in such environments for months, years, and in some instances, decades. The justification is rooted in institutional safety. Prison administrations classify certain individuals as threats due to documented behavior, involvement in organized violence, leadership roles within prison gangs, or repeated violations of institutional rules. Segregation is presented as a necessary measure to prevent coordination, retaliation, or escalation. Among those most frequently placed in these units are confirmed members of prison gangs. These groups, often referred to as security threat groups, operate within correctional systems with identifiable structures. Membership is typically established through documented affiliations, symbols, communications, or intelligence gathered by correctional staff. Prison gangs are not informal associations. According to official correctional reports, many have defined hierarchies, codes of conduct, and internal systems of discipline. Leadership roles are recognized. Orders may be communicated through coded messages, written correspondence, or verbal channels during limited interactions. The influence of these groups extends beyond individual facilities. Investigations conducted by law enforcement agencies have shown that some prison gangs maintain connections outside prison walls. Activities can include coordination with external associates, though the extent varies significantly by group and jurisdiction. Inside the prison, their presence affects daily operations. Incidents of violence, including assaults on other inmates or staff, are often linked, directly or indirectly, to gang activity. These incidents are documented in disciplinary records, incident reports, and, in some cases, criminal prosecutions. The response by correctional systems is structured. Identification of gang membership can result in heightened monitoring. This may include restricted housing, limited privileges, and separation from the general population. The goal is containment. But containment has consequences. Medical and psychological studies, including those published in peer-reviewed journals and reviewed by oversight bodies, have examined the effects of prolonged isolation. Findings consistently show increased risks of anxiety, depression, cognitive disturbances, and other mental health concerns. These findings are not theoretical. They are based on documented observations within correctional settings. Some individuals report difficulty concentrating. Others experience disruptions in sleep patterns. In certain cases, long-term isolation has been associated with more severe psychological symptoms. Correctional systems acknowledge these risks. Policies often include provisions for mental health evaluations, periodic reviews of housing status, and access to limited services. However, the implementation and consistency of these measures vary between institutions. Within this environment, time is structured but repetitive. Days follow a fixed pattern. Lights on. Meals delivered. Limited movement. Lights off. The absence of variation is a defining characteristic. For individuals identified as gang members, the isolation is not only physical. It is also strategic. Correctional authorities aim to disrupt communication networks. By separating individuals believed to hold influence, institutions attempt to weaken organizational control within the prison population. This approach is supported by internal assessments and, in some cases, external audits. However, documentation also shows that gang structures can adapt. Even under restrictive conditions, communication methods evolve. Messages may be encoded. Signals may be subtle. The extent of effectiveness in fully disrupting these networks remains a subject of ongoing evaluation within correctional research. What is consistent is the environment itself. Controlled, regulated, monitored. Every movement recorded. Every interaction limited. In this setting, identity is reduced to classification. Risk level. Housing status. Affiliation. The designation of gang membership carries specific implications. It influences where a person is housed, how they are monitored, and the degree of autonomy they retain. It determines access to programs, to other individuals, to movement within the facility. These decisions are documented through internal processes. Reviews may occur at set intervals. Some individuals are reclassified. Others remain in the same status for extended periods, based on ongoing assessments. There is no single experience that defines all cases. Conditions vary between jurisdictions, facilities, and individual circumstances. Policies differ. Resources differ. Oversight mechanisms differ. But the underlying structure remains consistent across many systems. Isolation as control. Separation as prevention. Restriction as policy. Behind each door in units like this, there is a record. A file that documents behavior, affiliations, incidents, and decisions made over time. These records form the basis for classification. And classification determines placement. In the context of prison gangs, this system is designed to limit influence, to reduce coordination, to contain what is considered a persistent and organized threat within correctional institutions. The result is an environment where silence is enforced, movement is minimal, and time is measured in repetition. For those identified as part of these groups, this is often where their experience of incarceration is defined. Not by interaction, but by separation. Before an individual is placed inside a prison system, a process begins. It is structured, documented, and standardized. Classification. This process determines where a person will be housed, how they will be monitored, and what level of restriction will apply. It is based on a combination of factors: criminal history, behavior, institutional records, and intelligence gathered by correctional staff. For some individuals, an additional designation is applied. Affiliation. Correctional systems across the United States formally recognize certain prison gangs as security threat groups. This designation is not informal. It is defined within departmental policies and supported by internal intelligence units. Identification is not based on a single factor. It requires corroboration. Correctional guidelines outline specific criteria used to determine gang membership. These may include documented tattoos, written materials, coded communications, photographs, or confirmed associations with known members. In many systems, at least 2 independent sources of validation are required before a designation is made. This process is recorded. Each piece of evidence is logged. Each determination is reviewed. The goal is to establish a verifiable basis for classification. Once identified, the designation affects nearly every aspect of incarceration. Housing decisions are adjusted. Movement is restricted. Interactions are monitored more closely. The rationale is rooted in documented patterns. Investigations conducted by correctional agencies and law enforcement have consistently identified organized groups operating within prisons. These groups often have defined structures, including leadership roles and chains of communication. Some have existed for decades. Their origins are documented in court records, law enforcement reports, and academic studies. In certain cases, they began within specific institutions before expanding across multiple facilities and, in some instances, into communities outside prison walls. Membership is not always static. Records show that individuals may enter, leave, or attempt to disengage from these groups over time. However, disengagement is not always straightforward. Correctional policies often require documented evidence of disassociation, which can involve extended monitoring periods and behavioral assessments. Within the institution, the presence of these groups influences operational decisions. Housing units may be organized to separate rival affiliations. Transfers between facilities may be used to disrupt communication networks. Routine searches are conducted to identify contraband or unauthorized materials linked to organized activity. Staff are trained to recognize indicators. Symbols, numbers, and markings are cataloged and updated regularly. Intelligence units maintain databases that track affiliations, relationships, and incidents. This information is shared across facilities within the same jurisdiction and, in some cases, between different states or federal systems. The objective is consistency. To ensure that identification is based on documented evidence rather than assumption. However, the process is not without complexity. Oversight reports and legal cases have raised questions about accuracy and due process. Some individuals have challenged their classification, citing insufficient evidence or misinterpretation of symbols and associations. These challenges are part of the system. Review mechanisms exist. In many jurisdictions, individuals can appeal their designation through administrative procedures. These reviews examine the evidence used in classification and determine whether it meets established criteria. The outcomes vary. Some classifications are upheld. Others are modified or removed. The process is ongoing. For those designated as members of prison gangs, the classification carries long-term implications. It influences eligibility for programs. Access to educational or vocational opportunities may be limited based on housing status. Contact with other individuals is restricted, particularly if they are associated with rival groups. Even communication is monitored differently. Mail may be screened for coded language. Phone calls may be subject to additional review. Visits, where permitted, are conducted under controlled conditions. These measures are documented in policy. They are not applied arbitrarily. They are part of a structured response to a documented issue within correctional systems. The presence of organized groups within prisons has been examined extensively. Academic research has analyzed their formation, structure, and impact. Law enforcement reports have detailed their activities. Court cases have addressed their influence in both criminal proceedings and institutional policy. What emerges from these sources is a consistent finding. These groups operate with a level of organization that distinguishes them from informal associations. They maintain continuity over time. They adapt to changing conditions. And they influence the environment in which they exist. For correctional systems, this presents a challenge. Balancing control with due process. Maintaining order while adhering to policy. Ensuring that classifications are accurate, consistent, and supported by evidence. Inside the classification room, these decisions are made without urgency. Files are reviewed. Evidence is examined. Designations are assigned. Each decision becomes part of a permanent record. A record that follows the individual through the system. From intake to housing. From one facility to another. From one review to the next. There is no single moment that defines this process. It is cumulative. Built over time through documentation, observation, and verification. For those identified as part of prison gangs, classification is not just an administrative step. It is the framework that shapes their experience of incarceration. It determines where they live, how they move, who they can interact with, and how they are monitored. In a system where control is essential, classification is the mechanism through which that control is applied. Quietly, consistently, and with lasting effect. Within prison systems, order is maintained through formal rules. Schedules are fixed. Movement is regulated. Behavior is documented. But alongside the official structure, another system has been repeatedly identified in correctional reports and criminal investigations. An internal order. It is not written in policy manuals. It is not publicly displayed. But it is recognized by both staff and inmates as a factor that shapes daily life inside certain facilities. This order is associated with organized prison gangs. Its presence is documented through disciplinary records, intelligence reports, and court proceedings involving crimes committed within correctional institutions. The structure varies between groups. However, common elements have been identified across multiple jurisdictions. Hierarchy is one of them. Leadership roles are often established, with individuals identified as decision-makers or coordinators. These roles are not always visible, and in many cases, they are inferred through patterns of communication and behavior rather than formal acknowledgement. Authority is maintained through enforcement. Correctional records document incidents where individuals have been assaulted for violating internal rules associated with these groups. These rules may involve conduct, communication, or interactions with other groups. Such incidents are investigated by prison staff. Reports are filed. Medical evaluations are conducted. In some cases, additional criminal charges are pursued. The documentation provides a consistent pattern. Violence, when it occurs, is often not random. It is targeted, linked to specific actions or perceived violations. This pattern has been noted in multiple studies examining prison violence. Researchers analyzing incident reports have found that a significant portion of serious assaults within certain facilities can be connected to organized group activity. The purpose of enforcement, as described in investigative findings, is to maintain internal discipline, to ensure compliance, to reinforce structure. This does not replace the authority of the institution. Correctional staff retain ultimate control. Security measures, surveillance, and disciplinary procedures remain in place at all times. But within that framework, these internal systems can influence behavior. They can affect decisions made by individuals about where to stand, who to speak to, and how to respond to certain situations. Communication plays a central role. Despite restrictions, documented cases show that messages can be transmitted within facilities. Sometimes this occurs through direct conversation during limited interactions. In other instances, written materials are used. These may include coded language or symbols that are recognized by specific groups. Correctional staff are trained to identify such communications. Mail is screened. Cells are searched. Materials are confiscated when they are determined to be unauthorized or linked to organized activity. Even with these measures, complete prevention is not always possible. This has been acknowledged in oversight reports and internal reviews. Adaptation is a consistent feature. When one method of communication is restricted, another may emerge. This dynamic creates an ongoing process. Monitoring, detection, adjustment. Within this environment, individuals navigate multiple layers of expectation. There are formal rules established by the institution, and there are informal expectations associated with group affiliation. For those identified as members of prison gangs, these expectations can intersect. Compliance with institutional rules does not automatically remove the influence of internal group structures. At the same time, participation in group activity increases scrutiny from staff. This creates a condition where behavior is constantly observed, documented, evaluated. The consequences of violations are defined within the system. Disciplinary actions may include loss of privileges, transfer to higher security housing, or placement in segregation units. In cases involving serious violence, criminal charges may be filed, leading to additional sentences imposed through the court system. These outcomes are recorded in official documents. They become part of the individual's institutional history, a history that influences future classification decisions. The presence of organized groups also affects the broader prison population. Individuals with no confirmed affiliation may still be impacted by the dynamics created by these groups. Housing assignments, movement schedules, and access to shared spaces are often structured to reduce potential conflict between rival affiliations. This is reflected in operational policies. Separation strategies are implemented. Units may be designated for specific groups or carefully managed to prevent interaction. These measures are based on documented incidents and risk assessments. They are adjusted over time as new information becomes available. For correctional staff, maintaining order in this environment requires constant attention. Observation is continuous. Patterns are monitored. Information is collected and analyzed. The goal is to anticipate and prevent incidents before they occur. This is not always possible. When incidents do happen, they are investigated. Reports are compiled. Findings are reviewed. Each event contributes to a larger body of data used to inform future decisions. Inside the housing unit, the routine continues. Doors open and close according to schedule. Individuals move when instructed. Silence returns between periods of activity. The structure remains intact. But beneath that structure, documented patterns indicate the presence of an additional layer of organization, one that operates within constraints, adapts to restrictions, and persists over time. For those identified as part of these groups, this internal order is not separate from their experience of incarceration. It is embedded within it, influencing actions, shaping interactions, and contributing to the conditions under which they live. The system, as recorded in official reports, is not static. It evolves in response to policy changes, in response to enforcement, in response to the individuals within it. And within that evolution, the relationship between institutional control and internal organization continues to define the environment inside high-security prisons. In correctional systems, time is measured in records, dates of entry, dates of review, durations of placement. For individuals identified as members of prison gangs, these records often reflect extended periods under restriction. Housing assignments remain unchanged. Classifications persist. Movement stays limited. The structure outlined in policy continues to apply, day after day. Oversight bodies, including governmental reviews and independent monitoring organizations, have examined these conditions over time. Their findings are consistent in one respect. Long-term confinement in restrictive housing remains a central tool used by correctional systems to manage individuals assessed as high risk. This includes those identified through documented evidence as part of organized prison groups. The justification is institutional. Safety, prevention, control. These are the terms used in official reports. They appear in policy documents. They are cited in legal proceedings. Courts in multiple jurisdictions have reviewed the use of long-term segregation. In some cases, rulings have required changes, limits on duration, increased access to mental health care, or more frequent reviews of placement status. In other cases, the practice has been upheld within defined parameters. The legal framework continues to evolve, but the underlying structure remains. Inside facilities, the daily routine does not reflect these broader debates. It follows a fixed pattern. Meals are delivered. Counts are conducted. Doors open and close according to schedule. The environment remains controlled. For those living within it, the passage of time is not marked by variation. It is marked by repetition. Studies conducted within correctional settings have documented the effects of this repetition. Cognitive patterns can change. Attention can narrow. The absence of varied interaction can alter how individuals process time and environment. These observations are recorded in clinical assessments and research publications. Correctional systems have responded in different ways. Some facilities have introduced step-down programs. These are structured pathways designed to transition individuals from restrictive housing back to less controlled environments. Participation is typically contingent on documented behavior over time. Compliance with institutional rules. Absence of disciplinary infractions. Engagement with available programs. The outcomes vary. Some individuals progress through these programs. Others remain in their initial classification. Decisions are based on ongoing assessments. Risk evaluations. Documented conduct. There is no uniform timeline. For individuals identified as part of prison gangs, the process can be more complex. Disassociation from a group may require formal documentation. Evidence of sustained behavioral change. Verification through monitoring. These requirements are defined in policy. They are applied through administrative review. The result is a system where change is possible but not guaranteed, and where duration is often measured not in days or months but in years. Beyond the institution, the effects of long-term confinement extend further. Research has examined post-release outcomes for individuals who have spent extended periods in restrictive housing. Findings indicate challenges in adjustment, difficulties with social interaction, increased need for mental health support. These findings are documented in studies conducted by academic institutions and correctional research bodies. They are part of an ongoing discussion about the long-term impact of incarceration practices. Inside the cell, these broader implications are not visible. What is visible is the immediate environment. Concrete walls, fixed fixtures, limited space. The conditions do not change. The structure does not shift. Each day resembles the last. For correctional systems, this consistency is part of control. Predictability reduces uncertainty. Routine supports order. For individuals, the experience is defined by that same consistency. Time passes without variation. Records are updated. Reviews are conducted. Decisions are made. And the system continues. There is no single conclusion to this process. No definitive endpoint that applies to all. Each case follows its own path within the framework of policy and classification. Some individuals leave restrictive housing. Some remain. All are part of a system that balances competing priorities: security and oversight, control and review, prevention and consequence. These priorities are documented. They are debated. They are revised over time. But inside the facility, the immediate reality remains unchanged. A controlled environment, a defined routine, a record that continues to grow. For those identified as part of prison gangs, this is where institutional policy and internal classification intersect. Where decisions made in offices and recorded in files translate into daily conditions. Conditions that persist, quietly, consistently, and over time. If you found this documentary informative, you can share your thoughts in the comments. Engagement helps bring attention to documented realities that are often not visible outside correctional systems. You may also consider supporting the work by liking, sharing, or subscribing. not as promotion but as a way to continue examining systems that operate largely out of public view.